Senator Haji.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Josephine, I think at this point you do realize there's a lot of confusion, even in the public, as to what happened with the Global Fund issue. Maybe, Chair, if you'll allow, I ask one question and then get the answer and then maybe have a follow-up question. Dr. Josephine, maybe just to take us through the role of your docket and what departments or institutions fall under your docket, and then explain to us, take us through as kids in school, what specifically is the role of your office as far as the malaria program and the funding from the Global Fund contains.
Through the Chair, thank you, Senator Haji, about the question. Since the new government, we have had like 3 executive orders. The first order was, it was called Professional Standards and Health Standards and Professional Management. I was only allocated, that is Order 1 of 2022, which was allocated me all the regulatory bodies, and a bit of public health, which was not well explicit. The other order came in 6th January. The first order, 6th January, where we have one numerical of 6, which now gave me as a role as public health and professional standards, which was signed, I think it is 6th of January, which it gave me all regulatory bodies apart from a few, that is NHIF was not under Josephine, KEMSA is not under Josephine, I can't remember everything. But now all the public health programs were under Josephine. From HIV, malaria, reproductive health, the issue of biovacs. Then on 29th of January, if my memory is right, we were transmitted another order from FELEX, which was brought in by the CS. 29th of January, where the CS came with another executive order. Transmitter said that is the current one, where a lot of, I used to have about 13 functions, they were reduced to 7. Where now the public health, they removed the issue of HIV was taken to medical services.
Point of order, sorry, I saw that you say we need to be educated like kids. Who was taking, reallocating functions, reassigning, reducing? Who was it? Was it through executive officer, the presidential executive order, or head of public service, or your minister? So that Kenyans can follow. You know, we want Kenyans to understand what we are doing.
The first one is signed by His Excellency, which he outlined very well the difference between medical services and public health and regulatory bodies, whereby the public health had about 13 functions with other regulatory bodies. Then on 29th of January, there is an order which is 6th of SIXTH. 6th. Yes. The same signature of His Excellency, transmittal by FELEX to the CS. It was forwarded to us by the CS. It hopes.
Can you use the full names?
The head, you know that.
Madam, you need to be specific so that even when they answered and the public is following, just mention the full names of those individuals and the title, so that somebody can imagine it's Felix somebody else. You cannot just say Ledama, you must say Ledama or Lekina.
So on 29th, there is another transmitter order which was brought in the office by the CS Health, that is Susan. And she said she has been given by the hand of civil servant, that is Felix Koskei, whereby the functions of public health were removed from 13 to 7. So HIV, reproductive health, neonatal, immunization, biovacs were taken to medical services. So the public health programs I remained with were only 2. That was TB program and malaria program.
Chair, maybe just so that we can follow through, and just allow me to take you back now that we have these letters, and for us to be able to get this clarity. In this letter, dated the 21st.
Point of order, Chair. I don't think the Madam Pierce had finished Senator Haji's.
Oh, you intervened.
Sorry, our deputy whip. Sorry. Maybe you can just finish.
Yeah.
Other members, I think we are addressing the question by Senator Haji, so can we be that systematic?
So the programs which were left now on on public health were only TB program and malaria program. So from then, I was only in charge of commodities now when it comes to procurement for TB program and malaria program with KEMSA. Yeah. Through KEMSA. Because KEMSA is an entity which procures all health products, commodities they are procured, whether through GOK, whether through GF, or through other partners. KEMSA is a procurement entity. But all the 3 orders, from the first order to the 3rd order, KEMSA has been in medical services.
Chair, if I may.
Yes, Senator Haji, and can we make our questions very precise? Because we have, we still have another around 4 people. Yes.
So, Dr. Josephine, the second question was, considering that now you were left with only the TB program and the malaria program, as far as the Global Fund project was concerned, what was your role at that office?
In Global Fund structure, we have principal recipients, 1, which is National Treasury. And we have sub-recipient, which is now malaria program. I'm only copied letters, but they deal direct with the programs as a PS. They can, but we have a chair of GF in Kenya. The Kenya coordination mechanism of GF is from medical services. It is TUM. Me, I was just a part of it because of having malaria. Initially, I was supposed to be the chair when the order was won, but when it was split, the CS Wafula had already written a letter to the GF that the chairman of GF is the chairman of KCM. The Kenya coordinating mechanism of GF is TUM, PS TUM. So I still sat there because I had 2 programs. That is malaria and TB program. So they could write letters direct to the chair, to Treasury, and to the PS Treasury. Me, I'm just copied, like the way they copy the program manager. And by then, the accounting officer, who was Dr. Mulwa, because he's the one who was authorizing for payment.
Dr. Josephine, I'm trying to understand where you come in as the principal secretary in charge of the malaria program. You indicated here in your opening statement that you wrote letters to that program of the Global Fund regarding the tender specifications that were missing. And you've also indicated that you included 2 individuals?
Yes.
2 individuals.
Yeah.
Were those two individuals included in the tendering process, or what were their roles, or where were they sitting?
I think, let me give some direction, because Senator Aji's question is related to what Senator Ledama was was asking. And I think we need to get over that so that we move to the next. So I think, Daktari, be as clear as possible on this matter of specification, and if I hear my members well, they want to understand that the specification that had been sent to Treasury, are you telling this committee that the specification that had been sent to Treasury is not the same specification that went to advert? Are you telling this committee that the specifications that left Ministry of Health to Ministry of Treasury were already specifications agreed upon with Global Fund, and KEMSA was supposed to tender on those agreed specifications? In the documents you have submitted, that you've just told the committee was submitted to Treasury, did those specifications include what you are seeking clarification from KEMSA? And yes, allow Senator Ledama to just make an intervention so that you can now answer that, and we move to the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this issue of specifications and your involvement is something very important. And, you know, specification could be different things. Could be size, color, could be all manner of things. But in this case, you were very specific. And you indicated that in your letter, inconsistency in specification for long-lasting insecticides treated nets for mass nets campaign 2023-2024. And this letter was dated the 21st of February, which you sent to KEMSA. And you said your role was only on the specs, nothing else. You're not the IE holder. Now, what I want to understand is this, and this is probably will be able to help us understand better. You're telling this committee that you were advised by the head of the malaria program that something was missing when the advert was issued. Was the advert in February or the advert in January? I remember very well the advert was, I think, the end of January or something like that. But your letter is almost the end of February. But to be clear, do you have your own specification different from the specification given by Global Fund? Or was that within the scope of your clarification? Because then, for you to go and say it is inconsistent, it means that Global Fund had given certain specification, and they have agreed with the Ministry of Health that these are the nets to be procured. And I'd ask, Mr. Chairman, for the PS, you're still PS. You know, when you are PS, you're a PS, whatever. When you're a senator, you're a senator, even if you stop being one. To clarify to us whether this PBO was another different animal, or was it aspects within the two nets that I mentioned here, polyethylene nets and polyester nets? Was it another type of different net altogether? So that we better understand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So I think now be as comprehensive as possible on that portion.
Sorry.
Through the chair, just let me
My
finish
apology.
before it disappears. I think the chair has brought it out very clear. The PBO nets, let me have this, just for the records.
Yes, because once you respond, I want us to move to another matter. I saw Senator Ajad probably wanted to add something so that you can...
As she was answering that,
Yes.
if she could also clarify about the two individuals that you included and what were their roles and where were they included.
Thank you very much. So, PS, you can proceed. Senator Chimera, welcome.
Okay, I think the issue of specification, what was given from the malaria program, what they agreed on between malaria, Global Fund, and sent it to Treasury, I did not neither add nor remove. It is inside this specification, dated way back on 7th November, if you now have it. If you look at page, it is under table 7. This one, which is even from National Treasury. You go to table 7, insecticide impregnation. I only raised this. The advert was the second, this one. You have this one? Yeah.
Honorable Senators, do you have the document dated 7th of November? Procurement of long-lasting sexual nets for the mass net campaign using Global Fund Malaria Grant Net. That's the document that is being referred to, Table 7. Madam PS, proceed.
If you look at Table 7, there is no addition nor subtraction. The advert left the second part. They put number 1. The treated warps, which they are...
We might not have, but I'm sure since we are also the CEO for the former CEO is also among the people, we shall be getting that. I think, honourable members, let's know things that may not be within the purview of the peers, but are related. Just take note so that the next candidate, when we invite, we begin from there. PS, proceed.
So this letter is tied to this. So neither did I remove, neither did I add, because these are, as I said earlier, are the standard specification which has been working for malaria program since 2016. So when the guy realized it is not in the advert, that's when they came. And I told them I cannot change something I do not understand. So we had to retrieve each and every document which had been documented. And that's why you see there's nothing addition. And I wrote to them. And if you look at the lower part, I just say to rectify, because it was already in the specification which was provided even in my absence.
So that we are clear.
Yes.
These specifications now on this document, were the specification already agreed between the officers in the ministry and the malaria control program and Global Fund?
Yes. If you look at this document, it is National Treasury. And our agent is National Treasury. Global Fund sit in National Treasury. So whatever a user does, agrees it with the National Treasury, then National Treasury sends for authority to KEMSA to procure.
Mr. Chairman, just so that the PS can be clear, and thank you for asking that question. So the PBO was initially within the scope of works.
Yes, it was.
As per Global Fund and the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Treasury agreement. And this is the evidence that you are presenting to us that supports your claim. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I think you can proceed to the other. There is only a section of the questions asked by Senator Aji. In the constitution of your technical people, there were additional of 2 officers. What was their role?
Thank you, Chair and Senator Haji. When I came in, as I said, the process had started. There's a document I'll share with the Chair here. They had already identified the people. Because as I said, as I come in, I needed to understand every process. There's a document they had put even the names to sit in the evaluation committee. There are too many. Yes. Yes. There's a document. Where is that?
Do you wish to table that document, Madam PS?
Yes. Mr. Chair, hereby table the following document before the committee, which is a bit different. It's the same, but already they had put the names of the people to do the work, which was signed again by Dr. Mulwa. They had given names for procurement of long-lasting LLNI. That is the tender opening. They had put names of evaluation and inspection and acceptance. So when I was written, another letter came from the KEMSA for me to nominate people. What I did, I sat with both Dr. Mulwa and Dr. Omar to tell me who are these. When it came to tender opening, I found there is one guy for procurement of malaria. So what I said, because as I said initially we were new, I inserted 2 names. I removed the procurement person, I put 1 name for a new guy, and the tender evaluation and another name. So I think I'll table that. I have a letter which I nominated the people to.
Thank you. Yes, you can proceed to the other questions.
Okay, let me table. Mr. Chair, I hereby table the following documents before the committee. Appointment of Tender Opening and Evaluation Committee for Massnet Campaign 2023-2024, dated 8th, because already they had a previous one. I only removed some 2 names and added one. The tender opening, I added Director of Administration. And for tender evaluation committee, I added a senior chief officer. And from then, I never received any feedback.
Thank you, PS.
Chair.
Senator AC.
Chair, I would want to understand from Madam PS, by removing the people you are removing and including your people, what did you want to achieve in those processes?
Senator Esther, I think as I took the oath, I was trying to do the best to my knowledge. I'm new as a PS. You have been brought a document from the previous regime, and people who had started a process since July. It is January, February. I decided I cannot now start, I don't even know them, come and explain who you are. As I said, public health was a new baby. So I said, for me now to keep abreast with what is happening in my department as a PS, let me put my staffs, not of any notion, not of any influence, just to have an idea what is happening.
Thank you very much. Yes, but then the question that begs is, then you are involved in the tendering process because you also participated in the appointment of evaluation.
My opening remark, I said, we provide technical specification. And when the user has it, I sent a team who are not now under my oath. They were under oath of KEMSA because they joined the team in KEMSA to provide the technical specification through pre-qualification by WHO or what they call the PCBP, the pest control.
Senator Chimera, then we move to the next question.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, I'm Senator Raphael Chimera. I apologize for coming in late. Madam PS, just a quick one. There's a letter dated 21st February 2023. That's from your office to the CEO KEMSA, seeking to rectify these specifications. I don't know whether the same was done by KEMSA and when exactly did the tender close? After any rectification, perhaps, or not?
As I said earlier, to my knowledge, I learned from the media that the tender was closing. I was just doing my work, then that's when I heard it has been cancelled. And that's why I said, from what I wrote, I had no idea whether it's closing or whether it's opening.
When did the tender close?
I can't remember.
To the best of your knowledge?
No, I can't even remember.
Did this letter that you wrote, dated 21st, elicit any response? Was there any response from KEMSA?
No, there was no response from KEMSA.
And so you still proceeded with the tender processes as it was?
Yeah, they continued with the process.
Okay.
Senator Amida, one more.
Sorry on that. So, Daktari, you are not involved in cancelling the tender. Did you cancel the tender? Number one. And then just one more thing, because it seems like you're all disconnected with this procurement process. Shed us some light on why you were fired. Just for us to understand this. It seems you're not connected in the procurement, the specs, and the rest of the issue. You did not cancel, I don't know, maybe I might be wrong, right? You never canceled the tender. So why were you fired?
Well, the same question I asked myself. Was I fired? But as I said, I was in the office around 6:45. When they came breaking news, I was signing the normal working hours. I was signing letters, reading, I saw in the media. And I said, okay. But from the media, we were told the president was advised. I think the question is, I would look for justice, or maybe we need to know what advice was the president given for him to go and say, Josephine, you are involved in this tender. and to my best of ability or knowledge, I have nothing. Whatever I did it to the best of my advantage or the best of knowledge as somebody who has been on the system for 34 years. Remember, I'm a seasoned civil servant. I know what is confidential. I know what is secret. I know where to touch and where to stop. And I think I would make an appeal or a prayer from this committee. I've had a good working relation. Even that day on Monday, I was terminated. I was with the president for a meeting in the morning. And even we had a meeting with him. I would like to be given a fair administrative, yes, to be listened. Because I think maybe it has happened, but I think I need to be given a listening.
No, please. Issues of hiring were not so clear. I think, Senator,
this
please.
is part of the issue that we asked for.
Order. Senator Aji.
Thank you, Chair. This is a rider from Senator Chimera's question. You wrote a letter on the 21st. There was no response from KEMSA. I'm assuming that you still proceeded, or KEMSA still proceeded with the procurement by setting up the evaluation and the tendering committee. And then thereafter, you included 2 individuals of your own. At this point, didn't you probably raise any question or doubt as to whether the procurement process should continue without the matter that you raised being addressed?
Chair, if you allow me to...
One, Senator Mariam, then Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Chair. To follow up with Senator Haji, because if you write a letter on 21st February and your letter does not agree with the adverts because there are some omissions, and later on you also it's just follow up of the question. Later on you add 2 people. So to my best of knowledge, Chair, it means that Daktari agreed with the specifications which is advertised. If not, she will have not gone a step of going for evaluation, adding all those people. Maybe that's...
Thank you, Senator Mariam. Senator Ledama.
The last question that we had asked, and which I think my sister here delved into, was shed light on the circumstances that led to the cancellation of the tender and your subsequent termination from office. I just want to pick it up from the second part of the query, because you had said that you would like to get some sort of justice. You've indicated in this committee that your role was purely on advice on the specifications, and that you are guided by an agreement between the Global Fund and the Ministry of Treasury, and to a large extent the Ministry of Health. I would like to know from you, what else did you do after you realized that you've been wrongfully terminated? Did you not take any action to be able to fight for your position and say, look, I need to be explained to why am I being terminated without being given an opportunity to be able to defend myself? What interest, according to you, was surrounding this tender? Because it appeared that this was a tender which 2 PSs are involved. You are involved in the technical aspect, which the chair said you then got involved in the tender process, because on the 21st, your letter, and also by you nominating 2 people to sit in the evaluating committee, I would assume to be able to ensure that the specifications that you are guiding on are met. I mean, don't you think that, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what interest was pushing this? And the last question that was asked is whether money was lost. Because, I mean, if just to fire someone from office and no money has been lost, because you say let's ask Treasury, but really, give us some more because you are not giving us all the details. There's something that you are not letting go. This is an opportunity for you to let go and just state as you know.
Thank you very much. Now we shall allow PS. No,
not
Senator
asking a
Mita,
question. I'm
order.
not asking any question, Chair.
We cannot continue on one matter. We have other people to come and answer. Reserve the other questions.
Tell her that I've not
We shall still have time as a committee to go through. Please, Josephine. Members, remember we are supposed to go back to Parliament at 2:30. We are already approaching 1 o'clock.
Let me start with Senator Mariam. Already the names were given long before even I came in. They were proposed. There's a document I gave you, still approved on 15th, where I said there are 3 groups nominated. I don't know if they have this. They have. Already the names were given. So whether I changed the name or I did not change, the process had already started. I only felt, as Josephine, I'm new in the office, I need to understand the process. That's only what mattered. I had no interest, I had nothing. Because already all the people who are nominated, they are the people who sat in those tender evaluation. And number 2, when I wrote a letter, I thought, you have written an entity, they are responsible. And I expected them that if they start the process of evaluation or whatever, they have already factored in the clarity, what the user department was asking for. Number 3, for Senator Olekina, I think, first, I was shocked. And I've not done anything. As I said, I've been in the service for 34 years, and with no disciplinary. When I was interviewed, there was no memorandum. So when I was told I'm sacked, it caught me unaware. I thought maybe something else would happen. You know, you have dreams, you have vision, you have been in this ministry, you have grown from a health center to the national level. I said maybe this is the time to change. And being a patient person, or having handled patients from the lowest level to the highest level, I thought maybe I can change something in this country. And I'll serve Wanjiku better. But when it came, it was a shocker. But as I said, majority of you watch the TV. You say people gave advice. They say, let her go. There are a lot of things which happened on the media and all of us listened, which was a shocker to me. So what do I do as Josephine? I thank the president. He gave me the opportunity to be a PS, which is a dream majority of us dream to be. But I didn't know it would turn like that. I still thank him. I had a good working relation. The question is, I would like to know, although when the pen which gives you the authority is the same pen which would withdraw you. So I would not challenge the president. But I would like the truth from this committee to come out. Whether I had a role I played in KEMSA procurement, or whether I influenced anybody in this procurement. But so far, I'll not challenge the president. He's the president. He's the one who gave me the position. But deep down, I would like to know what is this thing he was told about Josephine did, so that it comes out. So that the Wanjiku can judge me. And I can know I'll walk with my head high, as I say, because I never, even today I'll walk with my head high, because I was not involved and I did not interfere with any process of KEMSA. And I did this to the best of my ability as Josephine, the laboratory and a public health specialist, and a PS. Because when I raised the issue of the combination of net, I looked at Kenya is endemic for malaria. Number 2, we are talking 2035, we are going to eradicate malaria. To me, my thought would have been we use a better and a longer insecticide, and we try to walk the talk that we are going to eradicate malaria 2023. Then the other issue is when the president, I think he had seen further to bring a department called public standards, the issue of quality and minimum standards require quality. So when I looked at the specification and they lacked something, you are trying to emphasize that standards has to be the minimum, bare minimum.
Madam Pierce, I think you should be summarizing.
Yes, I was summarizing. So with that, thank you for calling me here. And I think one day the truth shall prevail. But I'm not going to challenge anybody. I've always sat in my house waiting for the next steps to be advised.
Chair, I think my question was not answered. And, I would feel better if it was answered. The question on you did a letter, and you've just stated in your statement that you thought the specification of the tendering should be very detailed and should meet the standards. You did a letter, there was no response. Yet, the procurement process continued. Why did that happen?
Chair, also my question I just asked, it was just one question. Were you involved in cancelling the tender process? Did you cancel the tender process?
No, for the tender cancellation, I did not cancel the tender.
You wrote a letter about the
Yes,
specification.
when I wrote the letter, I said, I thought I'm writing a letter to responsible people who will come back and tell me.
Thank you very much, Madam Pierce. I think I'll help you there. Senator Haji, we are having the immediate former CEO of KEMSA. She will respond whether she received the letter and whether she responded or not, and if she responded to who. On the tender cancellation, the tender was run by KEMSA and not Ministry of Health, so the start and end process lies with KEMSA, and I think we have opportunity to ask those questions to the next people. Honorable Senators, ladies and gentlemen, PS, we want to thank you for appearing before this committee and the information you've given us. As a committee, we want to assure you that this is a committee of parliament. Our work is to investigate and...
Chair, just on a point of order, could she provide with us her written submission so that they can help us in report writing?
Yes, I was coming to that. That as a committee of parliament, we work within our mandate, and our mandates are very, very, very clear to inquire and make sure that we get the right information. Should we need additional information, we shall be inviting you, but I'm directing that you give us, in all the submission, you need to give us a written submission.
Through the chair, please, can I go and write it so that I can do a cover letter?
Yes, please take time.
Okay.
Remember, whatever you submit to this committee becomes the property of this committee and becomes a public document. So I'm giving you up to Friday to submit through the clerk. You have written submissions. Of course, though you have tabled the documents you have tabled, I think so that you submit them properly now in an orderly manner in your submission, whatever documents you have tabled to this committee, because we are going to use them for reference, even as we invite other people to shed more light. Thank you very much. Clerk, I think for purposes of now you are free. For purposes of making progress, looking at the time, can we have the immediate former chair of KEMSA and the immediate former CEO together?
No, what I'm saying in terms of these two, video, because you didn't answer that question, is video a different net?
Terry. So I think we are ready. We can proceed. Honorable Senators, I think for purposes of our new visitors, I will only ask the honorable members to introduce themselves quickly, and then we can proceed.
My name is Ledam Molekina, Minority Whip, Senator in our county and a member of this committee.
Good afternoon. My name is Hamida Kibwana, Senator, member of this committee.
Good afternoon. I'm Senator Ukenyuri Esther, a member of this committee.
Senator Mariam Omar, Vice Chair of this committee.
Senator Raphael Chimera, a member of this committee.
Senator Jackson Mandago, the chair of this committee and senator for Uasin Gishu County. I think I will only allow the principal clerk and the lead clerk to introduce themselves.
Stephen Gikonyo, of the Secretariat of this committee.
Dr. Sakini, the clerk. Thank you, Chair.
Our visitors, Honorable Ron, and need to go on record.
Daniel Ron, Honorable Citizen.
Terry Ramadhani, CEO KEMSA.
Thank you very much. Now, the Standing Committee of Health is established pursuant to Standing Order number 228.3 and the fourth schedule of the Senate Standing Orders, is mandated to consider all matters relating to medical services, public health, and sanitation. In this regard, investigate, inquire into, and report on all matters relating to the mandate, management, activities, administration, and operations of the assigned ministries and departments. Amongst others, examine any statements raised by senators on a matter within its mandate. At its sitting held on Thursday, 25th May, 2023, the committee deliberated on allegations of irregularity of long-lasting insecticide nets at the Kenya Medical Supplies and resolved to open an inquiry into the matter. And that is the reason why we are here. And before we proceed, legal counsel, can you administer the oath?
I, Daniel Rono, do solemnly swear that the evidence I shall give before this committee in respect of the matters before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
I, Terry Ramadhani, do solemnly affirm that the evidence that I shall give before this special committee in respect of the matters before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Honorable Rono and CEO, I think we are going to fairly go through the questions. Honorable Rono, this committee just wanted to understand the circumstances that led to the cancellation of the tender and your subsequent suspension from the board. Madam Terry, this committee wants to know when the tender was advertised, when the tender was opened, and then it was closed, whether the tender was extended, and if so, describe the circumstances under which it was extended. Submit details of how many suppliers applied during the initial tender period. Submit details of how many additional suppliers supplied after the extension, whether there was any loss of public funds during the tender, and whether shed light on the circumstances that led to the cancellation of the tender and your consequent suspension from office. I think I'll ask the immediate former chair to start, and if there are documents you want to table, you can proceed to table as you make your submissions.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Daniel Rono, as you have heard. I'm the former chair of KEMSA. I managed to be there for about 3 months, and I thank His Excellency the President for giving me that opportunity to serve, though it was quite a short time. First and foremost, I have no document to table because mostly matters to do with procurement was not really falling under my ambit. Yes, you have asked me circumstances that led to the cancellation of the tender. I learned about the cancellation of the tender while when we were in the induction at Naivasha, when I heard that the tender for the nets had challenges, and I waited because that was the last day of our induction, and when we resumed the next day, I talked to the lady MD to ask what is the issue, but apparently she was away. She was abroad. So I called the procurement director. What is this I'm hearing about? And it's at a point that he told me the communication is not yet official, and the team, the Global Fund, will be communicating officially. As at now, he has only received an email touching on the non-responsiveness of the tender. So thereafter, I personally, that I think then the weekend followed, and then we were invited by a global fund for a brief on the tender results. That's when I learned about the official translation. So I attended the meeting, but I thought I should be accompanied by the board. So I called some of my board members who were available. There were 4 of them available. Attended the meeting, the brief meeting, being briefed by the Global Fund. So we were taken through the document of that we were for cancellation, which the conclusion was there was no response bid. That's the response from the Global Fund. And given the commitment to ensure that the nets are availed at the right time, and considering the long process obtaining through PPDA, it was prudent to procure directly from their end to expedite the process. But before then, they took us through as to why they thought none of the tenderers was responsive, particularly the 2 that our team had recommended, which was Patek and Polymers, I think. Sorry, Shopika Impex. So what they said is that Shopika Impex was non-responsive. Our team said it was responsive. But as far as Global Fund was concerned, it was non-responsive because the data security was not paginated. In fact, that's the first time I learned this vocabulary, paginated, at that time. Then the bid could have been declared non-responsive. So whereas our team recommended that it was responsive, the Global Fund said it was not responsive. Another company that our team had recommended as responsive, the Global Fund said the Global Fund, it was non-responsive because their review findings was that the bidder's bid was not sequentially paginated, having pages 30 and 30/1, 54, and therefore the bid should have been declared also non-responsive. So the 2 that our team had declared responsive were declared non-responsive by the Global Fund, and in short, therefore, as far as Global Fund were concerned, the whole, all the tenderers should have been declared non-responsive, except at some stage they said Tiachin Yokol International Trading Company was responsive in the stages of preliminary stage, that is the evaluation stage. But even our team had also equally declared in the preliminary stage responsive, but in the technical, yes, in the technical stage evaluation, our team declared Tiachin Yokol International non-responsive, whereas Global Fund felt they were responsive. The reason being, Global Fund felt this cited that Yokol Chemicals, which is Kangzhou Company Limited, is indeed a Yokol group, whereas our team felt it was non-responsive because sample that was submitted from your coal chemicals are not charged international. There was no link between your coal, limited, and not charging your coal international company. So there was the change of the names of the company was not the same, but the Global Fund felt this was the same one and the same company. So therefore, Honorable Chairman, the conclusion which I had mentioned to you, therefore, is what actually made the bid to have been cancelled, to my knowledge. And it's at that time we, as the board, requested the management to give us a paper on their part on what exactly transpired. And at that point also, we as a whole team requested the Global Fund if we could handle the other part of the job, which was warehousing and distribution.
Thank you very much, Chair. Initially, you had said you have no documents to table, but I can see you are making reference to some document.
I'm more than willing to, because I thought, because the management team who are here will be tabling the same document.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honorable Chimera, you want to ask?
If we...
Okay, Senator Chimera.
I'm advised by my colleague, Senator Ledama, we allow to take submission from Madam Terry, and then we can ask questions. We listen to Madam Terry, and then we can ask questions as a whole later. Is that fine? On because of time. And I concur with that. I think I'm well guided, Chair. I can ask my questions later.
Senator Mariam?
Chair, I also agree, but I need to maybe some clarification, more explanations on this non-responsive and responsive.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm told, and I learned when I joined KEMSA also, this matter called non-responsive means you don't qualify in a layman language. So just like, because I left Bunga where you are and went there. So as good as you are, thank you. But it means you did not qualify. In other words, you didn't meet the criteria to be awarded the tender.
Chair, with your kind permission, then allow me to recant my earlier statements, and I would wish to ask my questions now. Thank you.
Senator Esi.
Through the chair, I would like to understand from the honorable citizen, being former chairperson, maybe what your mandate is as the chairperson of this board, what your mandate is. This is also for my own benefit and that of the committee and for members of the public. Yes, thank you.
My mandate while in KEMSA was oversight. It's as good as your mandate as the Senate. I was oversighting KEMSA as you are oversighting counties. And we were handling more of a policy issue. So where procurement comes in terms of the board, is handling the issue of the budget approval, and of course, when the entire procurement document comes to us, is when we approve for the whole year, which had been done when I joined KEMSA, because I joined KEMSA in February, and those stages had technically been done. And even this tender that we are talking about, it had been floated it was advertised in January. So I got the process already ongoing. So I was technically green in this matter. But I was brought up to speed.
Chimera, now that you had already seated, I can only give you half a minute so that we can give the CEO a chance.
1 minute. Thank you, Chair. Wanarono, just a quick one. You mentioned, and it was your own submission, that you had that this tender had issues. Those were your words. What issues were these? Were you aware of these issues?
I'm not sure if I used the word issue, but I said the tender had challenges.
I was very careful when you were giving us a submission.
Correct. Which is what I've just mentioned about the two that the team recommended. So they recommended, whereas Global Fund felt that they had not met the criteria for recommendation. According to Global Fund, technically nobody actually met the criteria to be awarded the tender.
Okay. Just last one, Chair. On the same note, you came in as a board in February this year, isn't it? Was the board at the point of appointment, was the board sufficiently briefed about this particular tender? And was that the position? Were you properly briefed on this tender?
No.
Because again, I noticed you also said you heard about the cancellation while you were in Naivasha, and at the same time, the CEO was away on a foreign trip. Is it a situation whereby the board at KEMSA was not in control of what was happening?
The board was in control, but not in control of that particular tender, because at the only sitting that we had touching on that tender was the one that we were we had the presence of Global Fund. Otherwise, we never sat as a board to deliberate on the tender matter, because immediately we came from the induction, we had the meeting with the Global Fund, which they had invited me as the chair and the management. But I personally thought I'd be accompanied by my members so that we get a proper picture. And it's at that point that we requested for a paper from the management so that we can deliberate as a board. But that never saw the light.
So lastly, so it is your submission that this whole tender process was solely and wholly responsible by the management, from the CEO and the team?
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Ledamo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still call you Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Because once a chair, you're always a chair.
And you are also praying that I become one.
You still continue becoming one. I've listened very keenly, and one of the things that baffles me is that in your presentation today, you are appearing as if you're not part and parcel of the entire tender process. I just want to know whether the management team briefed you on all aspects of the tender, given that your role is oversight and you're always there. Could you walk us through, because the reason why we called you here is for you to shed some light of what you think led to the cancellation of this tender. Did the management walk you through what are the requirements with Global Fund? What is in scope of the tender process? What you can be able to tender for and what you will not be able to tender for? Because if you tell me that you learned informally that the tender was going to be cancelled, and then now you were called by Global Fund, and you went with your colleagues. Are you telling this committee that you were not aware of the technical requirements of the tender when you go through? Were you not given a brief by the management that this is a tender, it was advertised on this particular day, it was open on this particular day, it was closed on this particular day, and we have found the following to be responsive based on the scope of work and the agreement with Global Fund and the Ministry of Treasury? Were you not in the picture? Were you not in loop of what was happening?
Chair, the tender, when it was advertised, as I have said, for the first time, I was not in the picture. But the second time, when it was extended, I came into the picture when I asked the CEO. It has come to my knowledge, I'm seeing a tender that has been extended. It is at that point that I was informed that this is a Global Fund tender, and it was touching on specification. There was a change that has been requested from the ministry, touching on specification of the tender, and hence the extension. The next the brief I got was when I requested offer is that tender is when I was told a team of evaluation team had been appointed jointly with the ministry to carry out the evaluation of the tender. But the technicalities of the tender and what the requirements that I was not taken through as far as this tender issue.
My last question, just for clarity purposes, are you telling this committee that when you are appointed as a chairperson, you do not get a brief from the management of what was in the pipeline in terms of tenders, in terms of HR recruitment, in terms of the management, the books of accounts of KEMSA? Because now you're saying you first heard of the tender when it was extended, meaning when you came in, and I think you came in January. Did you come in November?
No, I came in February. And we were waiting to be briefed as a board, but the board was stood down. The board was
it
dissolved,
yeah.
And then that left me alone. And then after, two members were brought in. And as we waited for another member, there was two parallel Kenya Cassette notices, which we didn't get a full board. So as I was waiting to have a full board so that we could be taken through all this briefing. So even as we left, the board had not been constituted, and it had not been, all the members had not been appointed to the board. So I personally, we were waiting also the in-house induction, which we had prepared, because when this happened, it was about a week after. It was about, 3 days after before we left for induction. We formed what we called the board committees, which we were unable even to make in totality, because the 3 independent members could only chair the board committees, but we had 4 committees, so we had 1 person doing both. So we were not fully constituted, and we were waiting for our minister to fully constitute, and then so that he could also actually launched the board. So we did not go through those stages. We were not, we had not made a full board by then.
So I think, Chairman, thank you very much. Senator Ledam, I think keep that in your mind. And Honorable Senators, if you have other additional questions, we shall wrap them up towards the tail end. Can we now allow the CEO of KEMSA, Madam Terry Ramadan? There are a couple of questions. There are a number of documents that were asked for, so I'll allow you to make your presentation and table the documents that were asked and any other documents that you will be using in your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable members, good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. Chair, I do have some documents. The letter didn't ask for any documents, but I took it upon myself to bring some documents, which, Mr. Chairman, I hereby table the following documents. There is a summary of this particular procurement, which is this document, and there is...
Just a minute. You may proceed.
Yes, I was just confirming that I was not asked for particular documents. And then there is, Chairman, I would like to table this document as well. This document is a collection of all the various annexures as regarding this, this particular tender. It's a document that we prepared on the 15th, and we submitted to various authorities, and I hereby submit the same.
Legal counsel, can those documents be properly tabled? Where? How many copies do you have? You can proceed.
Honorable Chair, there are some specific questions that had been asked in the letter that was addressed to me. The first question was when the tender was advertised. The first question was when the tender was advertised. Chair, the tender was advertised on the 31st of January 2023, and you will find a copy of the advert of the same that we put on the Standard newspaper, as well as put it on our website and the procurement site as well. This was on the 31st of January. It's in the document that I've submitted. We have a copy of the advert. The next question is
proceed.
The next question is regarding when the tender was closed, and the closure of the tender was 10th March. And the tender documents were opened on the same date. The next question is whether the tender was extended, and if so, describe the circumstances. The tender was extended from the 23rd of February to the 10th of March. Chair, this is a common practice, and it happens and can be done in many different scenarios. In this particular case, we had received a letter from the PS Public Health, alleging that we had omitted certain specifications in the tender. The letter from the PS is also in the document that I have submitted to you. And the particular letter was written on the 21st of February, and we received it on the 22nd of February. And the letter reads, reference is made to the tender notice GF ATM Malaria NFM 2022-2023 OIT 02 on procurement of LLINS, which is long-lasting insecticide nets for malaria, net campaign 2023-2024. The Ministry of Health, through the Division of Malaria National Program, has noted the advertisement is missing some specifications when compared to the original specifications that were shared by MOH Division of Malaria. The specification under Table 7, insecticide impregnation on technology, misses the requirement number 2, which is synergist piperon butoxide, PBO, combination nets, which is inconsistent with the specifications that were shared by MOH Department of Malaria. The purpose of this letter is to ask KEMSA to rectify the error and fast-track the procurement process to ensure timely delivery and distribution and protect the population at risk of malaria. Once we received that letter, Chair, we wrote on the same day, on the 22nd, to the Global Fund Coordinator at the National Treasury, informing them that we will be extending the closing date from the 23rd to the 10th March, and the letter reads, KEMSA is in receipt of a letter dated 21st February 2023 from the Ministry of Health, State Department for Public Health and Professional Standards, Office of the Principal Secretary, citing inconsistencies in specifications. The specification under 7, insecticide impregnation technology, misses requirement for PBO, which is inconsistent with, and I quote, in view of this and in order to rectify the error that has been identified before closure of tender scheduled for 23 February, we have extended the tender closing date by another 14 days to allow room for clarifications, modifications, and submission of the same. On the 24th of February, we received a response from the National Treasury, and the letter reads, reference is made to our letter dated 22nd, notifying the principal recipient, which is the National Treasury, of the extension of the procurement of the nets due to the following reason. They quote the same reason. And they say the nets being procured by Global Fund grant are pyrethroid and not PBO. Therefore, the requirement for PBO should not be included in the tender document as part of the technical specifications. The specifications for nets being procured using the NFM3 grant are the same specifications used for the NFM2 grant 2019-2020 cycle. In the tender document for the NF2 grant, the requirement for PBO was removed because the nets being procured are pyrethroid. A copy of the technical specifications and extract of the tender document is attached. Prior, they continue to publishing the tender document was submitted to Global Fund for review, and Global Fund shared feedback as per the attached document. The purpose of this letter is to request you to proceed with the procurement using the tender document as approved by Global Fund. So, perhaps just for ease of understanding, I can explain a little bit. Chair, the specifications for nets has a document that has various different sections. It speaks to the color of the net, the shape of the net, the insecticide chemical to be used, and they are different. There is PBO, insecticide, there is pyrethroid, there are all these different criteria. But in the grant writing process, Global Fund and recipient, which is Kenya government, agree on which will be the various specifications cycle. So in this particular cycle, the question at hand, the specification queried was about the insecticide. The ministry had written to say that we had omitted the insecticide PBO, that we should have picked that particular specification and put it on the tender instead of the pyrethroid. We clarified that with Global Fund, and Global Fund confirmed that indeed the insecticide that was approved was pyrethroid and not PBO, and therefore continue with the process as previously approved. It is important, I think, for the committee chair to note that before, even as the letter from Global Fund is stating, before the tender went out on the 31st of January, the same was reviewed by Global Fund on the 16th of January. And the Global Fund team was reviewing to ensure that there was alignment of the tender document with the PPDA Act, with the Global Fund policy guidelines, with the procurement requests from the principal recipient, who is the National Treasury, and the technical specifications submitted by the malaria program, the WHO specifications, and the delivery schedule defined by the malaria program, as well as the Global Fund recommendations regarding drop-offs communicated prior. So when this letter came, the prudent thing to do, in accordance with the PPDA Act, Section 75, and indeed our own tender document, Instructions to Tender, page 8, Section 8, which is on page 11, there is a procedure that allows modifications to tender or extensions. So we invoked that procedure and extended the time as we then consulted with the ministry and Global Fund to figure out, is there something that we should correct? Because a notification of an omitted specification, Chair, is a material omission. If it was indeed an omission, it's one that we needed to rectify. As it turned out, it had not been omitted because Global Fund had only approved pyrethroid and not PBO, as per the letter that I have tabled. Chair, those are the circumstances. Question number 4 addresses the number of bids submitted. The total number of bids submitted was 17. There is a question that asks for us to differentiate how many bids were received before the extension date and after the extension date. And, Chair, it is impossible to tell how many were received before the extension and how many were received after. Because when you extend, you don't open until now the new closing date. So, whoever had submitted before that time and whoever submitted after the 23rd in the extension period, all the bidders were opened on the 10th of March. And that's how we know we had a total of 17 bidders. The next question is asking whether there was any loss of public funds. And, Chair, there were no loss of public funds because there can be no loss if there is no award. You see, Chair, this process was not complete at the point of discussions even with Global Fund, because a procurement process is completed either by awarding or by terminating. In which case, in this process, the end outcome was a termination. So there being no commitment of any work to any supplier, there can be no loss of funds. Question 7 asks what are the circumstances that led to the cancellation of the tender. and my subsequent suspension. On the 27th of April, Chair, Global Fund met with management and the board. And in that meeting, Global Fund shared with us a report which I would like to table. Mr. Chairman, I hereby table the report before the committee, the Global Fund report. And in that report, Global Fund talked about the fact that they had reviewed the entire tender process, and they felt that there were certain inconsistencies in the application of the criteria to evaluate the tenders, and therefore they felt that there being no option for us to redo the tender given the time constraints, because the nets have to be in country by November for the mass campaign this year, if we were to redo the tender process, it would take us a minimum of 3 months because of our particular processes and constraints of the PPDA Act. And in that time, there would be no enough opportunity for the manufacturer to manufacture and actually get the nets to us. Therefore, Global Fund intended to do the procurement themselves through their own portal called wambo.org. And once they had finished, then they would bring the nets to us to do the multi-sectoral distribution as agreed from the beginning. During this meeting, it was apparent, and Chair, quite surprising for me, from a technical perspective, to read some of the reasons why they felt that there was no responsive bidder. But given the fact that there really was no time, we could not belabor their decision. After all, they were the funder, and we needed to get the nets. So we all agreed that they could buy the nets. But Chair, in the document that I have submitted to this committee, I would like to take the committee through the preliminary evaluation, the technical, and the summary, all in summary. In the preliminary evaluation, we had 17 bidders. These 17 bidders, the first one was VKA Polymers. Our evaluation committee at KEMSA found the bid responsive. Global Fund found it non-responsive. And the reason that Global Fund gave was that the tender security was not paginated. One document, which is the tender security. The second company was Shabika Impex Private Limited. We found it to be responsive. Global Fund found it to be non-responsive. The reason given again was that the tender security was not paginated. Tianjin Yorkwool International, we found it to be responsive at preliminary evaluation, and Global Fund agreed with that finding. Vestergaard Sal, we found it to be non-responsive because the entire document was not paginated, and Global Fund agreed with that finding. Medsun Limited, we found it to be non-responsive because they did not sign the form of tender and the tender security was not provided, and Global Fund agreed with that finding. A to Z Textiles, we found it to be non-responsive because they did not provide the form of tender, and Global Fund agreed with that finding. Premium Movers, we found it to be responsive, and Global Fund agreed that it was responsive. Partech East Africa, we found it to be responsive. Global Fund found it to be non-responsive because the bidder's bid was not sequentially paginated on pages 30 and 54. The bidder's document had page 30 and 30 asterisk 1, and it had pages 54 and 54 asterisk 1 asterisk 2 asterisk 3. Billy Dollar Services, we found it to be non-responsive and Global Fund agreed. Landmark Solutions, we found it to be non-responsive and Global Fund agreed. Apicalmed was non-responsive and Global Fund found it the same. Mtoria Agency was non-responsive and Global Fund found it to be non-responsive too. Patanha Enterprises was non-responsive and Global Fund found it non-responsive. Globeco East Africa Limited was non-responsive and Global Fund agreed. Windsor General Supplies was non-responsive and Global Fund agreed without finding. Togi Investments, we found it non-responsive. Global Fund agreed with us. Homefix Limited, we found it to be non-responsive, and the same was agreed with Global Fund. Then the technical evaluation, therefore, we took through the ones that we had deemed as responsive. VKA Polymers, we found it non-responsive because of certain technical parameters like the bursting strength was not indicated, the shrinkage, the dimensional stabilities, the fire safety 16, etc. Global Fund agreed. Shobika, we found it to be responsive. Global Fund disagreed. Tianjin International, we found it to be non-responsive. The reasons we found Tianjin Yokul to be non-responsive is because the bidder was Tianjin Yokul International. The sample provided was Yokul Chemicals Kanzu Company Limited. We did not have a manufacturer's authorization because the manufacturer is Yokul Chemicals. Be as it may that Global Fund indicated that Yokul Chemicals and Tianjin Yokul are indeed a group. It is not for us during evaluation to make that link. That link was not made in their documents. Therefore, we found it to be non-responsive. Premium Movers, we found it to be non-responsive. Their product was not WHO pre-qualified and they were not registered by the Poisons Board, and Global Fund agreed. Patek, we found it to be responsive. Global Fund found it to be non-responsive because of pagination. Our financial evaluation, we found Shobika and Patek to be responsive. But as indicated, because of the disagreements in terms of the evaluation findings with Global Fund, then all the bidders were deemed non-responsive. And therefore, Chair, following that, again submitted on this document, you will find that on the 4th of May, the opinion was done by the Director of Procurement, having gone through that whole process. And once the opinion was done, the opinion was asking me to approve the termination of the entire process, which, per procedure, I duly did as the CEO, and the tender then stood terminated. Chair, that's a summary of how the entire process unfolded. In this document that you have, Chair, you have the Global Fund documents in terms of their grant confirmation. You have a copy of our tender document. You have the letters that we sent to all bidders on the 5th, informing them of the unsuccessful bid that they had done. And you'll also have a copy of the opinion that was done. You have a copy of the evaluation report, which is signed by all members of the evaluation team with all the details of how the whole process went. You have a copy of the due diligence report that was done on those that are at the financial evaluation stage, for those the companies that go to financial evaluation stage, and you will find the opening, the tender opening document. You will find the internal memos appointing the tender opening committee and indeed the evaluation committees. You will find the clarifications that we sent to the bidders once we had extended the timeline. You will find copies of the adverts, both the original, the initial advert in January and the extension, and a tender document, which also shows the guidelines that bidders use when they bid, and some of which that we relied on and invoked in terms of the extension of the tender period. And finally, you will find the communication from the ministry, the one that I made reference to, in terms of the specifications for the nets and the various parameters, where you will see for polyester nets, what are the different specifications. For polyethylene nets, what are the different specifications? And what are the colors? What are the shapes? What are the size dimensions? What are the designs? What are the insecticide impregnation? Different chemicals. What are the border fittings, the labeling, the descriptions, the packaging, all which was part of the tender document as appropriate. And you will also find communication between the National Treasury and KEMSA agreeing on the quantities and the specific delivery areas of which particular net and which particular county and the quantities. And you will also find the authority to undertake the procurement that was signed to start off this procurement last year in November, and ultimately the email correspondences between our staff and various Global Fund and National Treasury colleagues on the same. In terms, Chair, of my suspension, Chair, other than the public notification that came out on the 15th of May, communicating that the board is dissolved and myself and a number of my colleagues, technical officers, are suspended, there has been no formal communication from anybody about what the charge is or what the issue was or what are the details indeed of the suspension and what the expectations are. There's been no communication at all, which I find quite disconcerting, because there are procedures in the Employment Act on how these things are evoked and what follows after that. But I am left wondering, Chair, you can imagine I've had a few weeks at home and I've been reflecting on a lot of things, and I'm left wondering, given that this particular process, as demonstrated, there was nothing untoward about it, whether my suspension is indeed linked to this particular tender or perhaps to other reasons that I may not be aware of. Chair, I submit.
Thank you. Honourable Senators, if you have questions. Senator Chimera.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Terry, for your very detailed submissions. I just have two questions touching on on governance issues at KEMSA. First of all, there's this letter that you made reference to, dated 21st February 2023, written to you by the immediate former PS, Dr. Josephine Moore. Did you directly respond to this letter?
Chair, I did not, because, and I'm sorry I don't have the copy here, but I do have another letter, I believe, that might have come in the middle of that, directing me not to engage with PS Josephine, but indeed engage with PS Toom. But I did make a call.
The letter came from where or from who?
From the CS.
From the CS. Okay. Secondly, the other question I would have is...
Maybe before you proceed from there, whenever you make reference to any letter, we shall require that you submit a copy of that letter. Clerk, take notes. Chimera.
The other question I would have is the relationship between you as the CEO at KEMSA and your board led by this just former immediate chair here, Mr. Rono. It appears to us that Rono and his team as a board were completely unaware of what was happening at KEMSA, even if they were newly appointed. I would expect just logic dictates that if a new board comes into place, they found a CEO, then it is incumbent upon the CEO to provide at least a status report of what's happening in that organization. Was that done? And if not, why was it not done? And I also take a lot of concern on the fact that this is a new board and they are doing their inaugural meeting in Naivasha, and the CEO is missing from that particular meeting.
Thank you. So some clarifications, perhaps, Chair. One, the new board chair was appointed, I can't remember the exact date, but sometime towards the end of February. We had an induction program where he met a lot of the staff in-house, and we were going to sit and go through all the other documents that are relevant to the operations of KEMSA. But I must also be careful to say that it is not procedural nor practice to brief the board on specifics of how the tender process is going on any particular tender, because that in itself could be seen as some level of interference. It's important to understand that even with the PPDA regulations, even I, the accounting officer, only gets to know about how that any particular tender is going on at the point of opinion submitted to my office. And the director of procurement gets to know just before he brings the opinion to my office, because the team that evaluates the tender process is supposed to be independent. So it is enough for the board, and the board from a governance perspective reviews the budget, reviews a procurement plan, and reviews HR instruments. And those documents we had provided. As to the details and particulars of each tender, that's not practice. It certainly isn't. Okay. Now, this particular one then ended up at where we needed to have a meeting with Global Fund. Ordinarily, the process that Global Fund follows after they have done their own review is to sit down with the evaluation committee, not even the CEO, and make clarifications. On this particular one...
Madam CEO,
yes.
I think we want to stick to the questions that are being asked so that we can get all the questions from...
Yeah, I think
so. That's just be specific.
Okay. Just lastly, Chair, this is the letter you've made reference to from the CS that you've not tabled here.
Yes.
And it's my belief you'll table.
Yes.
Did you now end up responding to the other CS, the PS you've been told to respond to, Dr. Tum?
On this particular matter?
Yes.
I did not respond on this particular issue because in any case, in another few weeks, things were overtaken by events and we're having now to discuss termination.
I'm just trying to clarify, you received a letter from PS Josephine Buru and then also received a letter from CS Nakomish, I think, Susan, telling you to respond to another PS. Did you respond?
That was advisory on how to respond to letters because there had been some confusion and some discomfort.
So was there a response or no response?
To
any of the PSs?
On this particular matter?
These issues raised by Dr. Josephine Buru?
Not in writing.
Thank you.
Senator.
No, if the mic is not on, it means there are no questions. Senator Haji.
Chair, thank you. Ms. Terry, thank you for your presentation. And I appreciate the fact that you were going very fast through your notes. So I might have missed a few things and I'll probably need clarification. You said that the tender was advertised on 31st of January 2023. And then the closing date was 10th of March. Was that the first closing date or the second closing date after extension? So that was the extension date. At that time, you did an extension because you received a letter from PS citing an oversight in one of the specifications. So you went ahead and did an extension and then sought clarification from Global Fund Coordinator at Treasury after doing the extension, whereby you were advised that it was not necessary for you to have done the extension. Is that procedural, that you would go ahead and do an extension without getting clarification from the Global Fund Coordinator, or was that an oversight by itself?
Thank you. Chair, on this particular issue, timing is the critical factor. The letter from the PS came on the 22nd. The tender was closing on the 23rd. So the first action, according to the PPRDA Section 75, in terms of extensions and our own procedures in our tender document, is if there is a material issue that necessitates for the tender period to be extended, then you go ahead and extend. Because we needed the opportunity to clarify, was there indeed an omission? Because if there was, that would have a material impact on the outcome of the tender.
So, after extending the deadline, according to the Global Fund Coordinator Treasury, that this was an F2 grant?
It was NF3.
NF3 grant, which is what you refer to as pyrethroid net.
Yes.
So before you went ahead and extended and seek clarification from Global Fund, you had already advertised for the product. When you were doing the advertisement, did KEMSA know that they were advertising for NF3 program and the net required?
Yes, at advertisement we knew what net it was and what was required, and we knew it was pyrethroid. We knew, as per the letter subsequently received from Global Fund, that there was no change from the specifications in the previous cycle of NFM2.
So why extend them?
Because the PS had indicated that there is something omitted. Now,
she was very specific in what was omitted.
Yes.
And based on what was specific, the Global Fund guys indicated that that was not necessary because you were already bidding for NF3 program, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
So by the time you received this letter, you knew that what she was raising was not of importance to this tendering process.
What she was raising was of importance, Chair, because it indicates a material change to the insecticide. Now, the ministry, being the policy maker, in collaboration with Global Fund and the principal recipient, which is National Treasury, could have
Madam Terry, I think if I get a question of Honorable Haji, you received a letter from PS.
Yes.
You wrote on 22nd, on the very day,
yeah.
You wrote to Global Fund,
yes.
is it?
Yes.
When was this tender supposed to be closing initially?
23rd.
23rd?
Yes.
And you wrote on the 22nd?
Yes.
When did you get a response from Global?
24th.
On 24th. I think that is what you need to clarify to Senator, because essentially what Senator is asking is, was it necessary to extend that tender if already you've gotten the advisory? And primed on his first question was, you had the specification that was submitted.
Yes.
That is what was agreed upon by Global Fund.
Yes.
So the overlap of time is what the Senator was asking. The issue is, I think I had Senator correct. This letter was written, you received, and you wrote to Global Fund. He was asking, why did you have to extend if the specifications were correct?
Thank you, Chair. The reason we had to extend is because we received a letter from the ministry indicating that from the list of specifications we had omitted PBO. Now, that is a material change and ministry as policy makers, and the ones who agree with the donors what it is we should buy, might have some new information that we didn't. So we needed to have clarification. Has something changed? Because if we went ahead and ignored, as it were, the letter from the ministry, and it turns out that there has been a change in that particular specification, then we would have done this country a great disservice, because we would have gotten the wrong nets and would have gotten no time to undo the mess, if you like.
Senator Amida.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Madam CEO. You're very eloquent and in terms of clarifying issues. So I was just wondering, the board's role did not involve the procurement. That's what I'm trying to understand. So why would the Global Fund seek the board to communicate its decision? That is over the tender cancellation. Then number two, why would the Director Malaria Program bring the issue of omission of the PBO? Then the last one is if they were aware of any agreement, according to the documents, the ministry and the Global Fund, was there any agreement between that you are aware of between the ministry and Global Fund on the use of pyrethroids? Because it seems the pyrethroids had an issue. Then just one last one. Both the CEO, that's the question I wanted to ask the CEO, and you, seem not to be aware why you are terminated or fired or maybe suspended. So hii kizungumkuti hapa in between, I'm still trying to gather, because you have actually, tabled when a CEO, only 3 months old, does not have an idea. Chair. Oh, sorry, when a chair, sorry. 3 months old, you are not connected in any procurement or any cancellation. Neither did Madam CEO. So why, in layman's language, why were you fired or why were you terminated, both of you? It seems so painful for both of you, yet, you followed the procedure. Just whatever, a candid question.
Sorry, I did catch question 2. I just wanted to make note of it.
Question 2 was why would the Director Malaria Program bring the issue of omission of the PBO?
And 3?
And 3 is if they were aware of the agreement between the ministry and Global Fund on the use of pyrethroids. Were you aware? Because it seems like the board's role did not involve itself with the procurement.
Chair, the board was actually not invited by Global Fund. They were invited by my office. Somebody from my office called, because when Global Fund asked to meet, I thought it would be prudent to ask the board chair, to be in that meeting, so that as we are listening to the reasons as to why Global Fund decided what they decided, then it doesn't need to be in different sittings, so that nothing is lost in translation. And this, I think, for me, was informed mostly by the fact that the decision by Global Fund was very surprising. Because you see, the awarding of tenders, particularly given the volume of tenders that we have to deal with in KEMSA, it is unprecedented that a document that is provided in open, at the tender opening meeting, that is documented and minuted, that this is a loose bid bond, which nowadays even comes from an email, can be the reason why a document is rendered non-responsive, yet it is not part of the bid document. It was very surprising. It's very unusual. Therefore, I felt it was important to ask the chairman to come. And given I had gone abroad on an official assignment, and I was actually returning that very day, the meeting was happening with Global Fund, it was important to have the board. The director of malaria program, why did he feel the need? I am not sure why. I can't answer that question. I don't know why they decided to make the recommendations that they did. Am I aware, were we aware, was management aware of the use of pyrethroid? Yes, because NFM2 grant was exactly what we had advertised. And the insecticide impregnation was pyrethroid and not PBO. The question on Kizungumkuti, I'm not sure I have an answer yet.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ledamo.
I thought also she had asked me.
Rono, you have been a member of parliament and you only know you speak when you are given opportunity to speak. Senator Ledamo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I've listened keenly to both the chairperson and the CEO of KEMSA. And it's quite interesting that you still refer yourself as CEO. And I would maybe conclude that it's because you've not been fired, you've been suspended. I've got various questions, and I want to link my question to the earlier presentation by the PS, former PS. I don't know whether she has been fired or I would say former PS, because in your case you are suspended. One, in her submission, she tabled a document dated November 7, 2022, which is a letter that was addressed to you. And in this letter, it's got the specifications, which, according to her, is what she thought clarification as to why, in table number 7, why the synergist, in all them PBO were omitted. So the question that I want to ask is this. According to you, was this gentleman, and he sent a letter using the headline of National Treasury and Economic Planning, and his name is Stephen Mwiruri, Global Fund Coordinator. Now, what I'm trying to understand is this. You, in your submission, you indicated clearly that you go through a preliminary stage of ensuring that both KEMSA and Global Fund are in sync in terms of what you should procure. Now, at what stage was this letter, or was this letter never shown to you, or is the PS referring to a completely different tender and not the one that you advertised? Because in this letter, and I would assume that Global Fund are the ones who define the scope of works and not the Ministry of Health, or maybe guided by the Ministry of Health, general guidelines, and also all these other people that you referred to in your submissions, like the WHO, PPDA. You also talked about the National Treasury, which is a primary recipient, and then the malaria program. If this letter is indeed accurate, and I don't know whether you have a copy of this letter, and I'm happy to give you a copy of this letter, then why would you then argue that PBO was not part of the tender process? That is question number one. Question number two, which was asked, but I didn't get a clear answer, and maybe you need to be very clear on this, is you indicated to us that you never responded to the PS when she wrote to you a letter on the 21st, but you went ahead and extended so that you can try and correct, but you wrote to Treasury, and Treasury responded to you, and they said that you should proceed because that was omitted. Why then did you not share that again with the PS? And keep in mind, and I hope that you can be able to table that letter, you indicated that you were instructed by the Cabinet Secretary, Susan Akomicha, not to respond to the PS, Dr. Josephine Mboro. Now, the chair also alluded to 2 parallel board appointments. Could you shed some light on those 2 parallel board appointments? Who appoints them? Because the chair is saying I'm confused. There was an earlier question again, and I hope you're jotting down my questions, which was asked, about the board involvement in the tender process. And the chair of the board indicated that he was not aware of that. Was the previous board involved in the tender process, given that the PS indicated to us that the tender started in July, August 15th, actually. The day she said it was August 15th. That's a very interesting day in my life. I still remember it. And finally, the last question. And if you could try to demystify the difference between the polyester nets, the polyethylene nets, and the PBO nets. Are they one and the same thing, or is the PBO an ingredient of the polyester net and the polyethylene letter? And finally, and maybe I'll get an opportunity to ask you another question, is that it appears to us that the reason why you are suspended is because you failed to deliver or to close on the tender, which probably is $1 billion. Is it $1 billion shillings or how much? Yeah? Is it how much? 3.7 billion. That the 2 of you literally failed to agree with the Global Fund. Yet you had a preliminary meeting with them. You agreed. Was the issue of pagination not noted during the preliminary? Is there a strict rule in terms of pagination? Because it appeared that it was a technical disqualification. You've mentioned also 3 companies which are of interest. 2 companies that you approved. I think one of them was Shobika, and the other one was, I can't remember the name. But then there was a 3rd one, which Global Fund found them to be responsive. You found 2 to be responsive. One is Shobika, and then there's another one which is VK Patek. There's Patek. You found Shobika and Patek to be responsive. But Global Fund found this Japanese company, the Chinese company, to be the one responsive. Could you explain to us why you would not find the one that they found, yet they're the ones who are funding to be responsive? And is there any interest? And I want us to be very candid here. And Chairman, you'll allow me to ask the very last question on this issue. I am a keen listener, and I watch television a lot. And I noted, and this is a question that I'm going to ask the Cabinet Secretary when she appears here, is that she indicated on public television that she had sent certain people to assist in the procurement. Could you, and then when they came to see you, you were not there. Could you tell us who these people were, or whether the Cabinet Secretary was in the business of sending people to come to direct the procurement process? So let's try to be a bit candid so that we know. And then maybe we can be able to know why you were suspended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Yesi.
Just to add on what Senator Ledama was asking, I was also actually concerned why, if the PS actually wrote this letter to you and you didn't respond, then I do not know if it's a matter of maybe rushing to communicate, because I'm making an assumption if your technical team had previous knowledge on what they require, because they had already sent out the advert. Did we need then the PS to bring to your attention that we were missing this bit that on your technical team who floated the tender then? And finally, maybe advice from you, is the Kenya government losing anything in terms of malaria funding? This is if the Global Fund goes ahead and procures directly. And from what I'm actually listening, this looks like a very long chain, which might actually not be the Kenyan government alone, but the Global Fund generally, in as much as are actually assisting us, they are bits to explain to Kenyans and the world at large.
Maybe you can respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. Let's start with this document that Senator Ledama has, which is attached to the letter on the 7th of November, 2022, which was written to me by National Treasury, which is the principal recipient, giving us a table of targeted counties with the types of nets and the quantities and the costs, and telling us also that we need to send the draft tender document annexures to the National Treasury and to Global Fund for prior review before launching the tender. And attached to that was the revised specifications for polyester and polyethylene nets. Polyethylene nets. And Senator Ledama is speaking to table number 7. Table number 7 talks about technology. This is the insecticide impregnation. Yani, ina maana kwamba ile dawa that is put on the nets, because these nets are treated. Na kuna dawa aina mbili. One is the WHOOP's recommended insecticide. Now that one has a long list of different chemicals that are listed. There's a long list of information in the website of WHO. And it's supposed to be incorporated or coated into the netting to ensure wash resistance of the insecticide for at least 20 washes. The other insecticide impregnation is what is called synergist piperon butoxide, yani PBO. Those are two different kinds of insecticide impregnation. So when we put together the tender, which then was reviewed by Global Fund, we go through this entire document, make reference to what was agreed at grant writing, and then make the choices in areas where there are choices to be made. For example, table 3, there's rectangular nets.
Okay, while you're there, let me ask. So in that time of review, who sits in the review meeting? Is it KEMSA, Treasury, Directorate of Malaria Control, and Ministry of Health? Or who sits in the review to pick the specification?
So the flow is that the specifications are agreed by and put together by the malaria program. Then the ministry communicates to both KEMSA and National Treasury. And then there's a lot of correspondences between the technical officers confirming this, confirming that. But ultimately, when the tender document is put together, Global Fund, through National Treasury, has to review all the specifications that they are in line with what was agreed in the grant and in line with WHO, in line with all the other regulations. But the specifications are generated by the users. For all products, the specifications are generated by users, in which case, for us as KEMSA, the user is Ministry of Health, so in this case, Department of Malaria. If it was issues to do with TB, it would be Department of Tuberculosis or whatever, you know. So then they generate, because they are the technical experts in terms of what are the medicinal properties, what are the particulars of what this product should have. So the point I'm making, Chair, about this document is, this document has many specifications, but they are not applicable in one item. You can't have a net that is rectangular, conical at the same time. You can't have a net that has light blue, white, and green at the same time. You pick according to what was already approved. So in this case, we were buying rectangular nets. The color, I think, was light blue. Light blue. The color was light blue. The design of the net. And then the insecticide was the ones treated with HOPE's recommended insecticide, not the PBO one. So now when the letter came from the ministry saying that we omitted this PBO, it could be one of two things. Either there is not an understanding of the fact that you can't have both insecticides in the nets at the same time, or there was a change that we are no longer using WOPs. We are now using PBO. And that's a material issue, because PBO is a different insecticide from the ones recommended by WOPs in terms of chemical composition, but also in terms of cost share.
That is okay, understood. Only one question. So when these specs are picked, at that point, a blue net, a rectangular, oops, is it the decision of Global Fund or a decision that had already been agreed? And if they review, if Global Fund reviews those specifications, whom do they submit the review reports to? Is it KEMSA? Is it Treasury? Is it Ministry of Health? Or both the three institutions?
In my understanding, after Global Fund reviews what is now the substantive tender document, because now it has all these specifications, they approve for us to advertise. I am not aware whether they share the same with the ministry or not. Perhaps the people from Treasury can clarify.
Just on a point of clarification, which I think I'm understanding, but because I just want to see the link between the CS, the PS, and yourself in terms of the insecticidal impregnation. Your submission is that you cannot have a net with whoops and the PBO. Those are your submissions.
That is my understanding, because those are two different insecticides.
So during grant writing, it was resolved or resorted that you would go with whoops and you will not go with the PBO.
Yes.
Is there any reason as to why they would choose whoops versus the PBO? And is there any reason as to why the user, the director of malaria in the ministry, would then write to the PS and say, this was omitted in the tender? Because according to the PS, the person who raised the alarm was not herself, but the user, in this case, the director of malaria.
Chair, I would wish to just make a quick consultation with the Director of Procurement, because the technical team works behind the scenes, to understand why they would, ask for a change. Because I would imagine we would all be guessing unless there was some formal communication. So I'd just like to turn back and ask if there was any formal communication or why we should change. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, neither I or my team knows why the Director of Malaria would ask for that change, because the documents that we have submitted, when we make reference to the Global Fund Sorry, just a second. I'm just trying to find. The email that's in the document we have submitted that came from somebody in National Treasury confirming what it is that we were buying and that it's per the Global Fund requirements. And the Global Fund requirements were indeed the same ones that we had had before for pyrethroid. And
maybe it is important to know that email was written by who, because that's before I respond.
Claire.
And I think, honourable members, it is important.
It's in the documents table.
Because the user is Minister of Health, unless there are staff in Treasury who have been seconded from Minister of Health who are users to really understand these things. But I think since we have opportunity, honourable members, we have an opportunity to invite Treasury and also Global Fund and understand. I think we can make progress. We can make progress on that. Just take note so that we ask the next person. But but we would like, I would just like to know if maybe if you can remember, did the letter from the Cabinet Secretary advising you not to deal with the PS, Josephine, come before a letter or after a letter on this matter?
Chair, I can't remember. I need to find it. So many things were happening, but because the next question is on the letters, I'd like to talk about that a bit more.
Chair, sorry, Chair, I thought these letters have dates. You can quickly be able to tell the dates.
I'm saying I can't remember. I don't have the letter with me.
Madam Chair, you remember very specific details on the nets and specifications.
Yes.
You can't remember a simple date. Sure.
Yes, because I have hundreds of letters,
okay.
Senator, that I was dealing with at any given time.
You were very specific, even
Senator Jemere. Madam CEO, please take the questions very seriously.
I am.
You cannot persuade us. You see, a critical decision was made as a result of the letter from the PS to extend a tender. You did not respond to PS, Minister of Health. On your own submission, you've told us you are advised. Certainly there is no way within that period of time you can tell us you are not able to remember whether the letter came. Even if you can't remember the dates, at least you should be able to remember whether the letter came after the one of the PS or before.
Chair, thank you. I am taking the questions very seriously. And what I would like to tell this committee, because that's the next question I've been asked, is that there were various letters that I was exchanging with the ministry on many clarifications. And a lot of them were not getting answers. And at one point I had to write to the minister to ask. When I write to PS Josephine, PS Toom writes and says I should not write to PS Josephine. When I write to PS Toom, Josephine is not happy about it.
Madam
Who should I be addressing?
Just a minute. Please, we don't want to go around in circles. We have a very specific issue. Chair, we are not interested in the circles that have been made in the ministry. We just want this one specific item. Just answer that and we make progress.
Chair, I don't have the date in my head and I don't have the letter, but I will find it because it exists.
Senator Chimero?
Chair, I'm really shocked because, you know, it is your own statement here. I was listening carefully. You actually said when you received this letter from PS Josephine, you immediately wrote many letters to, I think, ministry officials. I am failing to understand why you really can't tell when the letter came.
Chair, I need to clarify. I did not write to ministry officials. Yeah. I wrote to the path where we must make clarification because that was the immediate need. a letter has come alleging that we have missed some specifications. The first thing you do is extend and ask Global Fund, can you please confirm? Should we make this change? And Global Fund says no. So then the priority of responding to the PS that, oh, you know, we didn't do what you asked. We had that conversation. But I know I have not written to her because after the conversation, the matter rested. She did not pursue for any more changes. But in the middle of all that, there was a whole ongoing debate about whom I should be writing to.
Mr. Chairman, maybe just to be able to cool the temperatures and get the way forward, was the letter from Global Fund in Treasury after the extension of the contract, was it copied to the PS Public Service or the PS Medical Service as well?
Yes, public health. You know.
Public health, not public service, but because you see, it's very interesting. And when the PS was here, Josephine, she indicated clearly that her job was interfered occasionally by executive orders. The first executive order had outlined all her roles. The second executive order came in with leaving her with only 2 roles, malaria and TB. Now, your chair also indicated here that there was 2 parallel boards being established. So the question is, now that there was all that confusion in terms of who to communicate to, was a letter which you referred to asking you to proceed, that the PBO was not part of the tender, was it copied to any of these people who had inquired?
Chair, it was copied to the head division malaria program.
Okay. So,
Any other questions?
Chair,
she was still answering the question.
Okay.
Chair, I think we've exhausted the issue now of the PS letter. The question of the letter from the CS.
Maybe so that we exit from that issue of the letter. So, is there a relationship between the letter from the PS and the termination of the tender? Do you think the letter from the PS seeking that clarification on additional specification is the reason the tender was terminated by Global Fund?
Chair, the reasons that Global Fund gave us are on the report that I've tabled, which they are talking to pagination and issues around technicalities in terms of manufacturer authorizations, etc. They did not make any blatant reference to the reason was the letter. They do mention it at the first page of their report, that there was a letter that was received from the PS ministry seeking to change. Now, whether that had any weight in their decision, I would not know. The letter regarding Nakumicha, I just want to make one clarification. I would like, Chair, this committee to note that the letter was not seeking to tell me, to advise me not to speak to Josephine about this particular issue. Let it not be conflated that I was advised not to write to Josephine on this matter. No. It was to advise that any communications I should have should be with PS TUM. And that was a response to several other letters that had been exchanged in a matter of weeks, is seeking clarity as to how we were going to operate, with KEMSA being under the Medical Services PS, but some of the budget, particularly for malaria, TB, and malaria and TB being under public health. So it's not that I was advised on this for this particular matter, but there was an ongoing conversation that was well drawn out about communications. That's the environment that was happening under. The board appointments question, I have actually here, I believe, copies that I can table of the 2 Gazette notices, which had different names. I think that's what the chair is referring to. Chair, I have here Gazette Notice number 2878, signed on the 6th March 2023 by the Cabinet Secretary. And another one, the same number, 2876, also signed by the Cabinet Secretary, but with different names. Mr. Chairman, I hereby table the following document before the committee. I also have here a Kenya Gazette of 17th March that revokes 2 members of the same board. Mr. Chairman, I hereby table the following document before the committee. It is true, Chairman, that in the period when Chairperson Rono was appointed, there was a lot of confusion in terms of who the board members were. In fact, if I remember the sequence correctly, there was some communication about not convening the board because it was not fully constituted. And then later on, because of the 2 members from the Ministry and Treasury, we determined that we could actually convene the board to at least start to get involved in what's going on in the institution. So 2 members of the Gazette notice that was revoked. When the Gazette notice was revoked, it left 2 members. So we called the 2 that were unrevoked. And then sometime, actually, when I think I was away for a few days, one of the members who was not in the unrevoked Gazette notice was called into the board. So when I came back, this individual was there. Having sought clarifications from the ministry about this particular person in a meeting, I was informed that that person was a stranger in our board.
Mr. Chairman, could you name the person you're referring to, please?
This particular person was called Andrew Onyach, which then got me to speak to the chair and say, you know, Chair, at this point and with this level of confusion, it is imperative we get appointment letters